amen, amen. Well, hey, let's see, is this thing on? All right, here we go. Genesis chapter 37. All right. And Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. So, as we're going through this study, hopefully you've read chapters 37 and 38. And chapter 38 just seems like it's out of place. I mean, it's just, if you read that, it's like all of a sudden, but it's not. Everything here is by God's design. It's to show us some things here. In chapter 37, again, we saw in the last chapter, we saw the patriarchs, we saw the 11 sons, and then the 12th son being born, Ben-Oni. It's man of my sorrows, but now it's man of my right hand. Benjamin, his father names him Benjamin. And Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. And these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren. And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah. Those are the concubines, or the more wives of Jacob, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. And he said unto them, an evil report unto him. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. Next week, we'll get into the comparisons. Again, what I'm trying to do here, a little unconventional, because normally you come here and I speak and stuff, but I'm just trying to show you how to do your own Bible study. And with the internet and just what's available out there, there's a lot of things you can do, or just this Bible program right here. You can click on Brethren, and you can see the root words and how it comes about and how it's used. And a brother of the same parents and those things, a half-brother, some father, and stuff like that. And it's good when you get into this and you understand how to use your Bible programs. So whether if you can't get online, or if you're not disciplined enough to stay onto the right sites when it comes to the internet there, then get some Bible programs there. But you can discover some of these words. And you'll see how it is. The law of hermeneutics, or hermeneutics, is the science of the study of Scriptures. If Jesus said it, if it was done by the apostles, and it was encouraged out the New Testament letters, then you have a pretty good understanding that that was doctrine, that was teaching. We'll see the same thing through the Old Testament as well. And we'll see this word brethren come up again. That again, some would try to use, of the Catholic persuasion, would say, well, when it talks about Jesus' brothers and his sister, it meant brethren, and it meant like kinship. So that is not the word used there in the New Testament. Those were Jesus' physical brothers and sisters, obviously his half-brothers and sisters, because Joseph knew not Mary until after Jesus was born. So, and when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his other brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably with him. One thing I just want to let you know as a parenting tactic, really doesn't work out well. All my kids know that I love them, and I joke around saying I have 3, but I really only like 2 of them. That's just for manipulation purposes, all right? And after 25 years, I got an iPad. So that will work out, but you have to be committed to that process, all right? But understand that. We see that when it comes to playing favorites, when it comes to doing those things, and it could be that way as well. Not a good thing. But we're going to see some comparisons between Joseph and Jesus. And we're going to see Joseph as a type of Jesus, a character of Jesus in the Old Testament. There's going to be a lot of comparisons. Now, Joseph was not perfect. Jesus is. And we're going to see many comparisons there. And understand this, there's people who say that there's 2 types of people in this world. Those who divide people into divisions, and those who don't. And they're divided. Do you understand? And you can see how the things that are divided when it comes to the first 11 chapters deals with the creation, how the nation came about, Abraham. But pretty much from this point on, we're going to see nothing more than the story of Joseph. And we're going to see how it relates to the birth of a nation and how Israel came about, the nation of Israel. Understand this, that whenever God changes someone's name, he pretty much sticks with that name throughout however he's changed it. And you'll see that through the Old Testament and the New Testament. But here we see Jacob. Jacob's name in the last few chapters, what did we find out? His name was changed to what? Israel. Governed by God, ruled by God, or ruled over. And so that's that whole thing with Israel's name. But here he's being called Jacob. And understand what he did here. Verse 5, and Joseph dreamed a dream and told it to his brother, and they hated him yet the more. And he said to them, here I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright, and behold, your sheaves stood around about, and made obeisance to me, to my sheep. And his brethren said to him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet even more for his dreams and for his words. So we see this, and yet he dreamed another dream, and he told it to his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother, shall we bow down to you? I and thy mother, brethren, indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee, to the earth. Verse 11, and his brethren envied him more, but his father observed the same. So even though his father rebuked him, he still observed it. There's something about this. And his brethren went to feed in their flock in Shechem, and Israel said unto Joseph, now look at verse 13 here. Now Israel said unto Joseph, do not thy brethren feed thy flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send unto them. Now, earlier on, there's a verse skipped over there. It's about this coat of many colors. That it's obvious that he had this coat of many colors, but it really comes from the translation that Martin Luther did during the Reformation, and trying to come up with it. Basically, it's a coat or it's a tunic with sleeves all the way down. Had various other colors, but it wasn't a sleeveless tunic. And that meant that he wasn't doing a whole lot of work. We know that was royalty. We know that was one of honor. We know that was one of privilege. But if you don't have sleeves on it, you got your work vest out there and you're working. So that's the garment that his dad made for him. Not just a coat of thick and splendid many colors. I know it'll set Joseph in the Technicolor dream coat thing there. But understand it meant that he had sleeves all the way down to his wrist. And so that's more of an accurate translation of it and understanding of it. And then there would be various colors to it. So everything was pointing to that Joseph loved. Now, obviously, Joseph and Benjamin from his wife, Rachel, whom he loved. And so there was favorites there all along. We've seen that all along. But yet, he still observed this saying. Am I going to bow down to you as well? You can cross-reference this with Revelation chapter 12. We're going to see the same thing there, that Revelation chapter 12 tells about the stars and the suns and the moon. It talks about the birth of the nation. Some erroneously place that as the church, saying that's the church that's going to go through the tribulation period there. It's not, because the church, if that's really the church, she's knocked up, right? She got pregnant. And yet the church is supposed to be what? A pure, chaste virgin, a bride that's meant to be pure and presented unto the Lord. And so that in Revelation, no, it's about the nation of Israel and its birth and how it came about. And that also went down into Egypt as well. We're going to see many parallels with this. You see, if you've got a good handle on the Old Testament, the book of Revelation is not a problem at all, because the book of Revelation is an Old Testament cloaked in terminology book. So you just got to crack the code. And it's right here. Look at verse 12. Says then, and the brethren went to feed their flocks in Shechem. Now, let's go here. We see the land again. Remember where they've come from, where they've traveled from, which is now modern-day Iraq. We know that's Babylon, and it comes all the way around over here, coming down to Shechem. Here's Israel, Tyre and Sidon right there. Here's Shechem. Here's Beersheba. Here's the Dead Sea. Here's the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aqaba, Beersheba. Here's Shechem right here in about the center. We know Jerusalem's going to be right there. Go to the next thing here. We see the land of the Canaanites. We see that again, remember what it said there. This was supposed to be promised in Genesis chapter 12 through 15. This really is the promised land, but they didn't take it. We can see the way that they go. Remember the Via della Mare, the way of the sea. The way of the Mare is the way of the sea. We have the way of the patriarchs on the ridge route. And then if you came over through here and then down through the Jordan Valley that way, that's the way known as the way of the king, or in Spanish, El Camino Real. So this is, again, they were coming. So here we have the sea. We have Tel Dan. We have the Jordan River. You got Jerusalem. Just above there is Shechem, and just above there is going to be over there. So you have it right here as well. So here's Hebron. This is where they are. They're going to travel some 67 miles north of Jerusalem all the way up to here, to Shechem, and then a little bit further north to Dothan as we're going to get to there. So you see that right there? So here's Hebron. They're going to travel all the way up to Shechem, which is about 67 miles. What's that in kilometers? I don't know. I don't care. So right there. is about where Samaria is, the biblical Samaria. So we know Samaria right there. Why? Because Jesus came through in John chapter 4 through Samaria. He came to Shechem, which is now known as modern-day Nablus. He comes there, the woman at the well. Remember that story there? And so there in John chapter 4, if not, go by it. So this we're at some 67 miles from Hebron. The word Hebron, we do a little Bible study right there, means place of fellowship. So they came from that place of fellowship and went to Shechem. Shechem, biblical term, means shoulder, and that whole thing is where we get the word where we're eventually going to be, was that shoulder of the saddle. It means saddleback. For those of you who've been and you've seen Shechem, it looks like a saddleback. You have Mount Gerizim on one side, and then you have Mount Ebal on the next, and there's that dip in the middle. That's where Shechem is. We already know from a couple of chapters previous that what happened with Simeon and Levi. What did they do? They tricked Shechem and Hamor and all of them. Say, hey, be circumcised. You can have our daughter Dinah, or our sister Dinah, who you've defiled. They wipe them all out. Well, they're pretty much feared now within the land. We know that. So they're going back to Shechem, and they're going to come 67 miles. And so they're herding their sheep and their flocks all the way from there, Hebron, all the way up. And now Hebron's not right, like you see, it's a little flatlander map right there. This is on a ridge. This is in a mountainous area here, so they're not right next to the Dead Sea. There's some couple thousand feet above sea level there. Remember, the Dead Sea is 1,385 feet below sea level, so there's about a 4,000-foot elevation change from the Dead Sea. You got to come up the mountains there. I'll take the ridge system all the way up. You can see here as well. Here's Jericho. Here's Ephraim. There's Shiloah. Some of us have been there. Sidecar, Sebasta. These are the towns right here. This is Mount Gerizim. This is Mount Ebal. See that? Real easy. Mount Ebal. Very good. Mount Gerizim. It's not that I'm very bright. I can just read, sometimes in order. And then up here is Dothan, which we're going to get to. Let me get out of here. That's a couple weeks ago there. No, I don't want to save. Jesus saves. Okay. But let me show you some of the other things. So they're going to go there. Let's go to the Bible. And his brethren went to feed their flocks in Shechem. And Israel, interesting, Israel. Hey, let's just click on that name real quick. Israel, Israel. God prevails. What do we see there? God prevails. The second name of Jacob given to him. The name of the descendants, the nation, Israel. So again, you just be able to click on. That's why, years ago, I used to have to get all these books out and do all these things. It'd be all over the place. Kimberly like, what are you doing? I got books everywhere, taking books with me to bed and all this kind of stuff. Look at me. You understand? Now, she never did that. She didn't have to say that. And so Israel. So now I'm just able to do the studies here. And you just go on and you just click on it. So I'm encouraging you folks, get the Word of God in you electronically. Get it in the hard copy. Have it on there. But let's go with here. So Israel said unto Joseph. So here's the implication. Jacob when he's in the flesh or being secular. Israel when he's being led of the Lord. God prevails. That's just a little map there. And Israel says unto Joseph, do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said to him, here I am. I don't know how wise that is. They already don't like him. He had these dreams. Well, we know, for those of you who read ahead, you know that those dreams come to pass. But it was the truth, but it also might be a way, this young 17-year-old, in the way he might administer, how he might be able to say that. You might have the good medicine, but if you serve it with a rusty bent needle, it doesn't go down as well. And so here, he sends them unto them, I will send them unto thee. And he said to them, verse 14, said to them, go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron and came into Shechem. So he saw on the map there. He saw that was going on there. He brings him to Shechem. Look at, and a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, what seekest thou? Verse 16, he said, I seek my brother, and tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And the man said, they are departed hence, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them there in Dothan. So here's some pictures. I took a bullet for us, guys. I did this for the team. I went through the terrorist-held towns of Jenin and Nablus, and very scary. It really wasn't. But let me just show you some pictures and some videos here of this is Dothan. And again, remember, Israel at its widest point, this is an area, we really didn't cross over there. I do believe in signs. Not that God gives signs, but I do believe in signs like this as well. The possibility of mines along the road. And this is a field. Israel right now, at its widest point from like Tel Aviv to the West Bank of Jordan, maybe at its best 50 miles. Everywhere else, the next widest point is about 25 miles, and everything else 10, 15, 20 miles. So it's not that hard. So you're saying, how would you find them in that valley of where they're going? How'd they get across the United States on the wagon trails? Folks, people leave breadcrumbs. They leave trails. There's signposts of the day. And these valleys are not that big. We were driving through the middle of them here, taking these pictures. And this is a valley of Dothan. This is a feeding place right here. Farmlands all the way around there. This is, again, still shepherds and sheep out there feeding their flocks and doing those things. And so they're right there. So they're bringing them to this place. Yeah, the United Nothings are there. This is the valley of Dothan. How do I know? Signs everywhere. It's always been the valley of Dothan. It will always be the valley of Dothan. It's still named Dothan to this day. But there's actually interesting things there that we weren't able to get to because they're blocked off. Because this is in the disputed occupied, if they say occupied territory, Israel's occupying this territory. It's under Palestinian control. And they're trying to remove every archaeological dig or find of anything that happens to do with Israel that proves their existence. This place, Dothan, is also known as the two wells. But we're going to find that there was a pit that he was put in. It's also, when you do the etymology of the word Dothan, it also is where we get the word law from. So just maybe stop right there. There is a lot of comparisons as you go through this. Joseph, if he's the type of Jesus, leaves that place of fellowship of the Father. He goes to search out his brethren. And he goes to his brethren. Well, who was he sent out to? To the lost sheep of Israel. And where does he try to go find them? The place of the two wells, but also he goes to try to find them in the what? In the law. So he leaves that place of fellowship, that favored, blessed son. What do we also know about Jesus? He was hated by others. He was envied by others. Jesus did have to bring back a bad report to his Father about those who are the vine dressers, those who are working the garden and stuff. He has to bring back a bad report. We know that Jesus is beloved of his Father because he says that. We're going to get to that. I don't want to spoil it for you, but in the Gospel of Matthew, we're going to get to that. And it talks about, this is my beloved Son, whom I am well pleased. So we see all this type of Joseph and Jesus, and we're going to see. And then same thing. He was given up. Why did they want to kill Jesus? Because they envied him. They envied him as well. So we go through here. Turkeys, right, hanging meat there. And this is, again, the valley. I don't have the sound in it. This is biblical Shechem. Camera work there. I was just trying to show you the sign of Jerusalem there. Again, going through the modern-day city of Shechem. Oh, actually, this is Jenin. This is on the north side of Dothan. So we got to go through Jenin. And Jenin is about 10 kilometers, 5 miles, a little less than 5 miles, then to about 6.1 miles. I'm trying to get the whole kilometer thing down. So again, it's a little bit further south, or it's actually north. And so again, south of that is we're going to see is Dothan. So let me just go through here. This is the valley of Dothan. So we're coming up on that ridge system. So when you would come from Shechem, you come through that ridge system, you come through Shechem, you go there, you leave the Mount of Ebal. Now this is facing towards the south, and you come down it, and you're going to see this valley. Lots of rocks. Here's the thing. Wherever the green is, that's probably where they're tending sheep. And it's really not that wide of an area. So you'll be able to see them. And remember, Jacob had what? Thousands upon thousands of sheep. You're going to be able to see them there. But they're not there at Shechem. And so this stranger tells them, go to Dothan. Go to that place of the two wells there. And again, driving through and coming through and seeing the area there. They're still tending sheep to this day, folks. And it's still the valley of Dothan. The place called the Two Wells, they have them there today. We couldn't get to the Tell of Dothan. And there's known as the Pit of Joseph. It's called that to this day. Not Jabu, but Jabba Joseph, or Yosef. And it's there today. So we weren't able to get to that. But this is the literal land that we're going through here, that we're driving through and we're looking into. So this, again, is coming to the north. We're going down. We're going into that valley. And this is an area that they would see into the valley of Dothan. You can see it's not that wide. If you have 10,000 sheep out there, if you have 1,000 out there, you guys catch me on this? I'm just trying to give you the lay of land. You'd be able to see them. He goes to Shechem, they're not there. He's got to go another 15 miles to the north to headed towards there to Dothan, and he goes there. Again, this valley right here. So you can see there's on the other side of that ridge system right there, on the other side of that valley, that valley and on the mountains is the Mediterranean. You're not going to take sheep over on the Mediterranean side because it's mainly just dirt and sand. This is a valley. It's always been the valley. It always will be the valley. And this is what they do there. Okay, let's go through Shechem. So let me get rid of those photos right there. Let's go back to our word now. Okay? So, and he said to them, I seek my brethren, tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And the man said to them, they are departed hence. And I said to them, let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them there in Dothan. This is also going to be a reoccurring thing as well. What's the man's name? We don't know. We know there's an unnamed servant. We know there's an unnamed man who leads for the bride for Isaac to go and get his bride. We have an unnamed man right here. But it says, and Joseph went after his brethren and found them there. Look, it says, and the man said, and they are departed hence. And I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them there. Let's go with him. We're going to see that quite possibly this man goes with him. I don't know. He points it out to them. Look at verse 18. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. Just make a comparison, folks. Do you know Jesus? Do you know people who've never met Jesus but have an opinion of him? And they've already, it seems like you showed up late to the argument, to the conversation. They've already conspired. It happened last night at the coffee house. And some guy wanted to come in. Brother Jimmy's back there is doing a really good job. Evangelizing, going through personal witnessing. It's great. Able to pray for him, know where he's going. But this guy wanted to hear himself talk more. And it just got to that point where he was just trying to philosophize and do all these things. So I started just using his logic. The same logic he was using, I was using it upon him. And it just, I don't understand this. And I said, well, it's your own logic. I'm just taking your exact same words and flipping them around on you. How can it be this way? And all those things. And so here's the thing. And when they saw him afar off, he already had an opinion. And this man kept bringing up religion. He kept bringing up church. And Jimmy and I and the others were there like, hey, dude, you're the one bringing up church and religion. We're not talking about religion. He says, well, I'm talking about Jesus. I said, yeah, we're not talking about religion. And then he just got him to the point where he was frustrated. And he goes, what are you talking about? We're talking about a relationship. He goes, well, that's religion. I go, no, religion. Rules and regulations. You can be in a religion and not have a relationship at all with God. You can be it's just rules and regulation. You can take Buddha out of Buddhism and you still have Buddhism. You can take Allah and Muhammad out of Islam and you still have Islam. You have rules and regulations. You have those things. But what we're talking about is a relationship. It's a relationship. And that just really stunned him. It stopped him. So from afar off, the same thing. This guy already had an opinion. These guys. And then when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. Verse 9, and they said to one another, behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him and cast him into some pit. And we will say, some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. You know, we also see that as an attack of the enemy. We see that in comparison. I mean, what did the enemy do at that time of temptation with Jesus? Always trying to thwart the plan of God. What have we, again, as we've gone through our study in the Gospel of Matthew. In the Gospel of Matthew as well, what did Satan try to do? He entered again, and we saw with Herod. And what did he do? He killed all those children. Always trying to kill off and kill off and kill off and kill off and trying to stop the plan of God. We're also going to see that when we get to chapter 38, when it talks about the genealogy that eventually is the genealogy of Jesus Christ. And we know that through Rehoboam, through Solomon, we know that that bloodline was cursed. But God made sure that the genealogy stayed straight and came through the right bloodline. And he worked those things out. So whenever Satan throws you a curve, I mean, God is bigger than what the devil and what our flesh can do. So look at this. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him and cast him in some pit. And we will slay him. Some evil beast. Look at verse 21. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands to deliver him to his father again. That was Reuben's plan. Let's throw him in this pit. But Reuben's going to try to save him and deliver him under his father. I mean, he wanted to get along with his brothers, obviously. So he's going to try to deceive them. He's going to somehow throw him in this pit. Let's not kill him. Let's do this whole thing. But yet, we see something. You know, you can't be in the land of Canaan, the Canaanites, and not be influenced with them if you're not going to keep your walk straight. Look, Proverbs, 17:1 or 18:1 says, a man who isolates himself brings about his own destruction. And the way of a child, his way what? Always leads to what? Destruction. I've never once had to tell anyone of my kids, stop sharing. You're too giving. You're too giving. No. What have we seen? Yeah, and all kinds of violence, right? You know, the little kids right there in that toy box. So here's the thing, folks, is that they're going to strip him. They're going to do these things. And Reuben doesn't have enough intestinal fortitude to stand up to his brothers, but he's going to devise a plan. He thinks it's a good plan. It says, let's throw him in this pit. Let's look at the comparison as well. Jesus was put in the pit. Now this word pit, well, hey, man, I got my handy-dandy little Bible program here. A cistern or a dungeon, a well, a dungeon, a fountain, a pit, a cistern. We know these things. As we study a little bit further, you can go to Acts chapter 7 where Stephen gives that great oratory in the history. We find out more nuances about this. This was a well, and the cistern was a way to collect water in the wilderness there. But they sometimes had cracks at the bottom, so they didn't hold any water. Here was an empty, dry cistern, this pit, and he was put in there. And then later we're going to see that he was brought out. What happened with Jesus Christ, folks? He was put into a what? To a pit. He was put into some place, but yet he did not suffer decay, did he? So it says, look here, it says, and Reuben said unto him, let's shed no blood. Look at verse 23. And it came to pass, when Joseph was come up on his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. And they took him and cast him into a pit. And the pit was empty, and there was no water in it. So it was this empty cistern pit there. So again, the same thing with Jesus Christ, was put into the ground. And yet we're going to see here in this story that he did not suffer decay as well. I have no contextual or context anywhere to say that Joseph was in there for 3 days. But we know that Jesus was in the mouth of Sheol, was in that pit, was there for 3 days and 3 nights. And so look, verse 25. And they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites. Think of the coldness and the hard-heartedness there. They put him in a pit. They could hear him. We're going to see that again, you go to Acts chapter 7, you go to Hebrews, you find out that Joseph is crying out. And, you know, you can get a physicist to tell you the exact time it would take from 25 yards away from a pit to reach their ears to hear them. But what we're going to see in this story, it took 22 years to go from their ears to their heart for this to really hear the cries of Joseph. And so they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead. And their camels bearing spicy and balm and mirth, going to carry it down to Egypt. Folks, I'm the only one here who can see that they had many things that with them, but 3 things are pointed out. The exact same things that we studied last Sunday: gold, myrrh, and frankincense. We see some of the various things that they're bringing in the spice and the trades and come through this. And this is also known as the spice route. There's a way that you can cross over. You can go down to Egypt this way. Or you come back over higher the way I said and come down the Jordan River side and cross in, and that's how you can get down to Petra. That was the place that the Tibetans hung out. That was still in existence to this day, or in their day. Verse 26, and Judah said unto his brethren, put a line under there, circle it, highlight it, do whatever your computer program and your electronic Bible or your hard copy says there. And Judah said unto his brethren, what profit is this if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Folks, for those of you who know that Jesus comes through the line of Judah, the tribe of Judah, the lion, this is Judah. We get introduced to Judah here in a little bit different way. And this is think about it. If we're trying to show the pedigree, and that's one of the reasons why the Jews are still looking for their Messiah today. Jesus did not come through the pure bloodline or the sinless bloodline or the perfect bloodline of a family to ascend to the throne here. He came, as Isaiah 53 says, as a suffering servant. So look at this. So Judah says, come let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother in our flesh. And his brethren were content. Then there passed by Midianites, merchants, and they drew and lifted him up, Joseph, out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph into Egypt. You see, we're going to see that same thing as well as in Revelation chapter 12. Out of Egypt I've called this nation. We're going to see that Joseph is going to go down into Egypt. We're also going to see the comparison of what happened with it. We just studied this last Sunday in the Gospel of Matthew. Where did Jesus go? He was warned in a dream to take him down into Egypt. A very young life, and then later comes out. So again, the prophecy is being fulfilled over and over and over again. And Reuben returned to the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit. And he rent his clothes, and he returned unto his brother and said, This child is not, and whither shall I go? Reuben had a plan. Let's throw him in the pit. Comes back. Well, Reuben, what were you going to do? Well, see, I was going to take him out. But here's the thing. Reuben wasn't going to stand up to his brothers. Was he? We're going to find out later a little bit more about Reuben when he meets up with Joseph another 22 years later. But was he going to save Joseph so he can endear himself to his father? I don't know. Did he really have guilt and remorse about putting his brother in the pit? That he just could not stand up to the crowd, to the mob, to his own brother, so he was going to sneak him away somehow? Was he going to get him out of the pit and say, hey, don't tell Daddy anything like that? I'm saving you from the bros right now. And, you brought this on yourself, Joseph. And we don't know. But what we do know is he had a plan to get him out of there. Look at verse 31. And they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid there of the goats and dipped the goat in the blood. Remember we talked about Bethlehem and where Jesus came from? Female goats did what? They were for the peace offering. The male goats were for what? The sit offering. So here a goat, here something is, or not a goat, here a kid, sheep is killed of the goats. And we're going to find out something else in the next chapter about a scarlet thread and about the scapegoat. And dip the goat in blood. Here's the scapegoat right here. We're going to see these things. And they sent the coat of many colors. And they brought it to their father and said, This have we found. Now know whether it be thy son's coat or no. Dad, do you recognize this coat? Verse 33, and he knew it. He said, It is my son's coat. And evil beasts have devoured him. They already had a plan of what they were going to say. Now Jacob, and understand this, he says, and Joseph is without doubt rent into pieces. And Jacob rent his clothes. Wait a minute. He sent him out as Israel. How's he receiving this news? As Jacob. Remember Jacob? Dirty, sneaky thief, heel catcher, who deceived his uncle, later becomes his father-in-law, tricked him, did all these things, tricked his brother Esau, and now he's being deceived himself as well. I go back to this because just being a student of history. Now through all the history, we know that Watergate, President Nixon, and why he was impeached and taken down and all these things like that, we know that he really wasn't behind the Watergate break-in. What it really came down to, and G. Gordon Liddy spent 5 years in jail because he wouldn't break the confidence that he felt that he was tasked with, but someone in the administration tasked him to break into the Watergate Hotel and go to the Democratic National Committee and steal a book. He had it set up with the spies that he had to go in there, the Cubans that he had to go in there with, and he gave that former assistant attorney, John Dean, gave them orders to steal a certain book. It is assumed that John Dean's wife used to be either a prostitute or a madam, and that was a book that her name was in. And he had it arranged. Gordon Liddy thought he was doing something for the re-election of President Nixon. It's something top secret. He didn't realize this until after he got out of jail, after 5 years of being held in contempt for not speaking. And he's like, what? I did 5 years for what? What was Watergate about? And even if you've ever listened to the tapes where they finally released President Nixon asking Mitchell and asking his other advisors, saying, are we responsible for any of this? They didn't know because there was such a secret. There were so many people out there doing so many secret things. Charles Cosfin, who later was known as the plumbers, one of the plumbers who would fix these leaks or these information leaks and black bags and dirty tricks. No one really knew. But here's the thing. That's what President Nixon fostered, was secrecy, backroom deals, and that's what his administration was about, and that's eventually what he got taken down with by his own device. Let's go back now to Jacob. Jacob, it was told that Abraham was to raise his children after the Lord. Isaac promised. Isaac never left the land of Israel. Abraham did a couple times. Jacob. But Isaac, that child of promise, never left the promised land. He kept to it. He tried raising his kids and doing those things, but we see some things that have played out with Jacob and Esau. And now we see in Jacob's life, his life, why wouldn't the kids imitate him, follow after him, and see those things? Listen up, parents. Your kids are watching. Your kids are watching. And they're going to maybe fall into the same sins or the traps or things. But if you're walking right, hopefully they'll follow after your relationship with the Lord too. I know many kids who walked away from the Lord, hate their parents, and because there was so much inconsistency in their lives. And that's the whole thing about that takes them down as the most. But God is a God of redemption. God can redeem these things. God can work these things out. And we're going to see that's going to be worked out in Jacob's life as well. Now he's being called Jacob. And Jacob rent his clothes, verse 34, and put sackcloth upon his loins and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, for I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. Look at verse 36. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's, and the captain of the guard. Look at verse 1 of chapter 38. So that ends that. Jacob, again, if you sow to the flesh, what are you going to do? You're going to reap the flesh. You sow to the wind, you're going to reap the whirlwind. That's not karma, folks. It's not karma. 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, bad company corrupts good character. Do not be misled. God is not mocked. Bad company corrupts good character. The thing that I would tell my kids, the thing I tell everyone else around me, if your character isn't that great to start with, you get corrupted even sooner. But look at chapter 38. Now, if you've read ahead, this seems out of place. We're back to Judah. We're back to Judah, and as we quickly will go through this, and it came to pass that at the time that Judah went down from his brother and turned into a certain Adulamite, whose name was Hira. And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite. Look, Isaac. They found a bride for Isaac. Remember what Abraham said? It says, don't. Tells his unnamed servant, don't go to the Canaanites here. Go back to our people. Get us, and see, the father's supposed to be setting these things up. He's supposed to be looking out and says, go and get a wife from them. Not to be going with these Canaanite women. We're going to see here that Judah goes and sees this Canaanite woman. His name was Shua, and he took her and went unto her. Didn't marry her. We're going to see that he's married to her next. And she conceived and bore a son and called his name I know the joke. Did he err? Yes, he erred right there. And she conceived again and bare a son, and she called his name Onan. And she conceived and bare a son and called his name Shelah. And he was at Chizeb when he bare him. So this is some 20 miles away from Hebron. So Judah's striking out on his own. He's doing his own thing there. And he's setting up his own family, getting away from dad and all of them. And he goes and he hangs out and he gets this Canaanite woman. Now look, we understand the story. Jesus, the Messiah, is going to come through Judah. But look who he marries. He marries this Canaanite woman eventually. I mean, you see that he's with her first, and then eventually we see that he marries her and has these 3 children. Look at verse 6. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, whose name was Tamar. And Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord slew him. It doesn't say what his great wickedness is, but do you understand and see the compromise? Jacob was going back and forth from Jacob to Israel, Jacob to Israel, Israel to Jacob, Jacob to Israel. There seems to be a lot of, duality that's going on there. He doesn't seem to have a whole lot of control over his kids. We're going to see that Reuben and some others are going to have incest with their stepmothers there, with Zilpah and Bilhah, the concubines who later became wives of Jacob. And so here, we don't know what this wickedness is, but God's going to take him out of the way. And Judah said unto Onan, go unto thy brother's wife and marry her and raise up a seed unto the brother. Verse 9. And Onan knew that the seed would not be his, and it came to pass when he went in unto his brother's wife that he spilled it on the ground, lest that he should give seed to his brother. We're going to see this in the Levitical code, that this is going to be incorporated. This was already around. You raise up a seed. Your firstborn, you go and you marry your brother's wife, and you have a first child, and you name it so your brother lives on. But look what it says here. Now, many have used this passage, and it's just ridiculous to say, well, God killed him, was going to take him out because of the sin of masturbation, or because he spilled his seed, because that's what you do when you masturbate and those things. Or coitus interruptus and those things. You're not supposed to be doing that. And I've heard all the junk about it, but that's not it. He was supposed to fulfill this law that God had already written on their hearts, but later we're going to see it in the Mosaic and the Levitical law there. But he wasn't going to honor it. Look, he did not have to marry his brother's wife. He didn't have to. He could have passed it off to who? To the Goel, to the kinsman redeemer. Someone else could have. It was just to keep this alive. He could have said, waited for the little brother to get a little bit older and do that. But what did he do? He used her for sexual things. Look, if you're just going to have sex with her and just the physical gratification of that, and you're not going to fulfill what the laws is going to, so God takes him out. Look at verse 10. And this thing that which displeased the Lord, wherefore he slew him also. Look at verse 11. Then he said to Judah, to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow at thy father's house till Shelah, my son, be grown. For he said, lest peradventure he also die, as his brethren did. Something wrong with that woman there, maybe. And Tamar, in the process, again, so then Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. And in the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died. And Judah was comforted and went up into his sheep shearers at Timnath. And he and his friend Hira, the Adullamite. You got to understand the whole sheep shearing? That was a party time. Everyone got together, shared sheep. There was a big celebration time that was going on there. And just make note of this, folks. Usually at those times, those high, great times of celebration and rejoicing is when temptation comes in. We say that at every men's and women's retreat or church retreat, those things. Hey, we're having a mountaintop experience, right? Well, where are we going to when we leave here? The valley. And it's oftentimes that the enemy comes and attacks us at our greatest, what we think is our strength, or what a great time of rejoicing and those things. Look, it was told to Tamar, saying, verse 13, behold, thy father-in-law goeth up to Timnath to shear his sheep. And she put away her widow's garments from him off, and covered her with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in the open place, which is by the way of Timnath. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and was not given unto him as a wife. When Judah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot, because she had conceived her face. Folks, understand the practice of this of the Canaanites. Even when you were married, there's going to be a certain point in time to where you're going to give yourself up to be a temple prostitute. That was part of the worship of the Canaanite gods. Even if you're married, you're going to spend time as a temple prostitute to your Baal, to your Ashereth, to your God. And it was a common practice, and everyone just understood it. And so he's in this land of Canaan. He knows the practice was going on. So that's why he's perceiving. Look, verse 15. And when Judah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot, because she had covered her face. Verse 16. And he turned unto her by the way and said, Go to thee, I pray thee. Let me come in unto thee. For he knew not that she was his daughter-in-law. She said, What wilt thou give me that thou mayest come unto me? He said, I will send thee a kid from the flock. And she said, Wilt thou give me a pledge till thou send it? Verse 18, he said, What pledge shall I give thee? She said, Thy signet, thy ring, thy bracelets, and thy staff, that is thine hand. And he gave it unto her, and he came unto her, and she conceived by him. She arose and went her way, and laid by her veil from her, and put on the garments of a widowhood. And Judah set the kid, look at verse 20, he sent it by his friend the Adullamite to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he found not. Verse 21, then he asked the men of the place, Where is this? Where's this harlot that was opened by the way? He said, There's no harlot in this place. It's not happening here. And he returned to Judah and said, I cannot find her. And he also, the place said that there was no one there in that place, no harlot. 23, verse 20, then Judah said, Let her take it. Judah said, Let her take it to her, lest we be shamed. Behold, I sent this kid, and thou hast not found her. And it came to pass that 3 months after that it was told to Judah, saying, Tamar, thy daughter-in-law, hath played the harlot, and also, behold, she was with child by whoredom. And Judah said, Bring her forth, and let her be burnt. Not like burnt alive or burnt dead, but sort of like it's where we get the scarlet letter from. There was a branding that was going to go on. Let's brand her. Note right here, folks, just a little thing. Watch this on the televangelists. Watch this on the people who are preaching. Whenever someone gets on their pet little hobby horse, often the thing they preach about the most is oftentimes the things they struggle the most. Often the things that they condemn the hardest at times is sometimes things that they deal with. Early on in our courtship, we'd watch Kimberly and I, so we would not do bad things. We'd put on Jimmy Swaggart. That kills the mood right there. And he was always preaching about sex like that. And Kimberly's just asking me, she said, what do you think about him? I said, I think he's got a problem with that. Jimmy Swaggart's also the one who called Jim and Tammy Baker a blight on the cancer of the body of Christ. And that they should be eradicated from the body of Christ. And then 2 weeks later he says, no, I think they're okay. We should forgive them. We should forgive them. And a couple of weeks after that, he's exposed that not just his infidelity, but his sexual perversion goes all the way back into his youth. That means he went all the way through seminary and all the things that he would do with prostitutes and stuff, and it came out. Look, he thinks this is going to be hidden, but it's not. So he brought forth and sent forth and brought alongside by them, whose name they are. There was the child, and he said, look, discern, I pray thee, whose are these, the signet and the bracelets and the staff? And Judah acknowledged them and said, she hath been more righteous than I, because that I did not give her to Selah, my son. And he knew her again no more. And it came to pass at the time of travail that, behold, there were twins were born. Look at verse 28. They travailed, and one put out his hand, and the midwife took him and bound his hand with a scarlet thread, saying, this came out first. And it came to pass, as he drew back his hand, that, behold, his brother came out. And she said, how hast thou broken forth this breach be upon thee? Therefore his name was called Pharez. And we're going to see something here next week about the names and stuff like that. But we're going to see that scarlet thread as well. May I just make a conjecture here? I see this as a precursor to Jesus and John the Baptist. These two right here. Because Jesus was before John the Baptist, but yet drew back in. That scarlet was upon him. And yet when you go in, well, do your own little Bible study. Go and click on the names and find out what they mean. And then go to the New Testament and find out how Jesus and John the Baptist were as well. But I want to close there tonight. That you look at Judah's life and you look at his mom, and we see that the bloodline that he comes through with. If anything that we're going to see in chapter 38, there's the grace of God. There's the grace of God. And even though you might try to, or I might try to outplan God or outthink God, he wasn't supposed to be with a Canaanite woman, and he was not supposed to have these wives or these kids to have these wives or the Tamar, all this kind of stuff. So what happens? God still succeeds because through his daughter-in-law, Jesus Christ still does come through the bloodline of Judah. And when you look at Matthew's gospel, you see that there's 4 women mentioned there. This one played the prostitute. Rahab was a prostitute. And then you look at Mary, and then you look at the others there. So you look at Ruth, and you look at their genealogy, and look where they came from. You can't outthink God, you can't out-trick God, and you can't end-run God. And God's will be accomplished. It's just that, do you want to participate with it? So let's look at the genealogy of Jesus Christ and realize the same thing in this room here today. No, there is none righteous, no, not one. All we are like sheep have gone astray. We have followed our own way. We're like sheep without a shepherd. Each and every one of us. So there's not perfection there. So please, I'm not trying to de-glorify Jesus Christ in the bloodline. I'm just trying to say that God became man just like us, with just passions. He was perfect, and he was able to fulfill that covenant and fulfill that and pay that price for yours and I sin. But next week we'll get into a lot more of the comparisons in the weeks to come. But hey, go ahead. Go and Google's Jesus and Joseph comparisons, because that's where I'm going. I'm going to the internet, some other studies and things, and look at all the comparisons and look at all the contrasts that are going on there. That when Jesus Christ says, you look to the Scriptures and you look into the law, and you look to the prophets, and they all talk about me. That's why he can confidently say, you should have known the time of my coming. Even how he's going to ride in on a donkey on that day. And what is going to be said of him. How he was born, how he lived, how he died, and how he's risen from the dead. And just as all the prophets have foretold those things. And so you look at about 102, 120 different type of comparisons. Take away half of them and you still have some incredible coincidences of Joseph and Jesus. But let us go this and understand this. By the grace of God, there we are. None of us are perfect. We're in a good family, imperfect as we are. But let us seek to strive after the God who's a God of grace and love and mercy. So Lord Jesus,